The sound of my sister's palm connecting with my cheek echoed through Brennan's fine jewelry like a gunshot. Every customer, every employee, every person within 50 feet turned to stare as the sting spread across my face. But what happened next would change everything I thought I knew about courage, family, and the strangers who sometimes become our greatest protectors. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Victoria Hayes, and 3 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I was 24, working as a marketing coordinator for a small tech startup in downtown Portland, and finally saving enough money to afford something I'd dreamed about since I was 16, my grandmother's engagement ring. Well, not exactly my grandmother's ring. That had been sold years ago when money got tight, but I'd found an almost identical vintage sapphire ring at Brennan's Fine Jewelry, and after 6 months of putting aside every spare dollar, I finally had enough for the down payment. The ring represented more than just jewelry to me. It represented independence, the ability to buy something beautiful for myself, to honor the memory of the woman who raised me when my parents couldn't be bothered. My grandmother, Eleanor Hayes, had been the one constant in a childhood full of moving apartments, changing schools, and parents who treated responsibility like an unwelcome houseguest. That Saturday morning in October, I woke up with the kind of nervous excitement you get before a job interview or a first date. I'd called ahead to confirm the ring was still available, transferred the money from my savings account, and even picked out a special outfit, a navy blue dress that my grandmother would have called appropriate for important occasions. Brennan's Fine Jewelry sat on the corner of Morrison and Fifth, a small but elegant shop with thick carpeting and glass cases that gleamed under warm lighting. I'd been there twice before, once to initially see the ring and once to ask about payment plans. The owner, Mr. Brennan, was a gentle man in his 70s who'd been running the store for 40 years. He remembered every customer and treated each piece of jewelry like it held someone's dreams. I arrived at the store at exactly 30 minutes after opening. I wanted to give myself plenty of time to complete the transaction, and maybe even wear the ring out of the store. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, and Mr. Brennan looked up from behind the counter with a smile. "Victoria! I have your ring ready right here," he said, reaching beneath the counter. "I cleaned it up special for you this morning." That's when I heard the voice that would make my stomach drop. Well, look what the cat dragged in." I turned around slowly, already knowing who I'd see. My sister Melissa stood near the entrance, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked exactly the same as she had 2 years ago, when we'd had our last fight, polished, confident, and ready for battle. Melissa was 3 years older than me, married to a successful lawyer named Brad, and living the kind of life that looked perfect from the outside. She drove a BMW, lived in a house with a 3-car garage, and never missed an opportunity to remind me how much more successful she was. What she also never missed was a chance to make me feel small. "Melissa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm shopping for anniversary jewelry," she said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in that way that always made me feel like I was wearing a costume instead of clothes. 7 years of marriage deserves something special, not like some people who have to buy their own jewelry. Mr. Brennan cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Should I give you ladies a moment?" "No," I said quickly. "I'm here to pick up my ring." Melissa stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume. "Your ring? You mean you're actually going through with buying that little... what was it, some vintage thing?" The way she said vintage thing made it sound like I was purchasing garbage from a thrift store. I felt my cheeks start to burn, but I forced myself to stay calm. "It's a 1940s sapphire ring," I said. "It's beautiful, and it's mine." "How much are you paying for it?" Melissa asked, loud enough that other customers could hear. I didn't answer. The price wasn't her business, and I wasn't going to give her more ammunition to use against me. "Oh, come on, Victoria, don't be shy. I'm just curious how much my little sister can afford on her. What do you call it? Your job at that little computer company?" Mr. Brennan placed the ring box on the counter, clearly hoping to move things along. Here we are, Victoria. Would you like to try it on one more time before we complete the transaction? I opened the box, and the sapphire caught the light beautifully. It was exactly as stunning as I remembered. A deep blue stone surrounded by tiny diamonds, set in white gold that had aged to a warm, creamy color. It looked like something from a movie, elegant and timeless. It's perfect, I whispered. Perfect? Melissa laughed. Victoria, that thing looks like it came from a costume jewelry bin. The stone is tiny, the setting is old-fashioned, and honestly, it's kind of sad that you're buying your own engagement ring. It's not an engagement ring, I said, my voice getting tighter. It's just a ring I wanted, something special for myself. Something special for yourself, she repeated, mockingly. Do you know what Brad bought me for our last anniversary? A 2-carat diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany's. Real jewelry from a real store, not some dusty old thing from a pawn shop. This isn't a pawn shop, I said, my hands starting to shake. And there's nothing wrong with buying something for myself. Other customers were definitely watching now. An elderly couple by the watch display had stopped pretending to browse. A woman with her teenage daughter was openly staring. Even Mr. Brennan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. There's everything wrong with it, Melissa said, her voice getting louder. You're 24 years old, Victoria. You should be focused on finding a husband, building a real life, not wasting money on jewelry to make yourself feel better about being alone. I'm not alone, I said. I have friends. I have a job I like. You have nothing, she interrupted. You live in a studio apartment, you drive a car that's older than you are, and now you're spending your savings on a ring that probably isn't even real sapphire. That last comment hit like a physical blow. I'd had the ring appraised, it was real, and it was worth more than I was paying for it. But standing there with my sister's voice cutting through me like a knife, all my confidence evaporated. The stone is genuine, Mr. Brennan said quietly, trying to help. And the craftsmanship is excellent. It's a beautiful piece. Melissa turned her attention to him. And how much is she paying for this beautiful piece? I don't think that's... Mr. Brennan started. $1,200, I said, my voice barely audible. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Then Melissa started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a loud, harsh laugh that filled the entire store. $1,200? Victoria, are you insane? I wouldn't spend $1,200 on a ring from a grocery store vending machine. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this is? I wanted to disappear. I wanted to melt into the floor, to become invisible, to be anywhere but standing in that jewelry store with my sister's laughter ringing in my ears. Every insecurity I'd ever had about money, about my life, about not being good enough, came flooding back. Maybe I should think about this more, I said to Mr. Brennan, reaching to close the ring box. No, Melissa said, her voice suddenly sharp. Don't you dare back out now. This is perfect. This is exactly the kind of impulsive, stupid decision you always make. Buy the ring, Victoria. Waste your money. Prove to everyone here what I already know. What's that? I asked, even though I didn't want to hear the answer. That you're still the same pathetic little girl who can't make good decisions. That you're so desperate to feel special that you'll throw away your savings on junk. That you'll never amount to anything more than... She was still talking when her hand moved. I saw it coming but couldn't react fast enough. The slap caught me across the left cheek with enough force to make my head snap to the side. The sound echoed through the store like a thunderclap. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The silence was absolute. Then I heard a voice from behind me, calm but carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the store stand a little straighter. Touch her again, I dare you. I turned around with my cheeks still burning and found myself face to face with a man who commanded attention without saying a word. He was probably in his late 50s, with silver hair cut in a precise military style and eyes the color of steel. He wore a simple navy suit, but something about the way he carried himself made it clear this wasn't just any businessman browsing for jewelry. Melissa's face had gone pale. Whatever confidence she'd had moments before evaporated as she took in this stranger who'd witnessed her public assault on her sister. "Excuse me?" she stammered. "This is a private family matter." The man stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Melissa and me. When he spoke, his voice was measured but carried an edge that made the temperature in the room seem to drop 10 degrees. "Family matter or not, I just watched you strike a young woman in public. That's assault, and it's unacceptable regardless of your relationship." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Mr. Brennan had moved around the counter and was hovering nearby, clearly torn between wanting to help and not knowing how to handle the situation. The other customers had formed a loose circle around us, no longer pretending they weren't watching. "She's my sister," Melissa said, as if that explained everything. "She was making a stupid decision, and I was trying to—" "You were trying to what?" the man interrupted. "Humiliate her? Control her? Explain to me how hitting someone is ever an appropriate response to a purchase you don't approve of." I touched my cheek gingerly. The sting was fading, but I could still feel the heat from where Melissa's palm had connected. I'd never been slapped before. Not even as a child. The shock of it was almost worse than the physical pain. "Look, sir," Melissa said, her voice taking on the artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "I appreciate your concern, but this really isn't your business. Victoria and I are working through some issues, and your issues don't give you the right to assault someone." That's when Melissa made her biggest mistake. Instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, she drew herself up to her full height and gave the man the same condescending look she'd been giving me my entire life. "And who exactly are you to lecture me about family relationships? Some random customer who doesn't know anything about our situation." The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a wallet. From it, he extracted what looked like an ID card and held it up for Melissa to see. "Admiral James Morrison, United States Navy. 4 stars. And in my 35 years of military service, I've never once seen a situation where striking an unarmed civilian was justified outside of immediate physical danger." The words hit the store like a bomb. Admiral. 4 stars. I didn't know much about military ranks, but even I understood that this man was probably one of the most high-ranking military officers in the entire country. And he was standing in a jewelry store in Portland, defending me against my sister. Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The color had completely drained from her face, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. I didn't realize. Admiral, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cause a scene. This is just a misunderstanding between siblings and... The only misunderstanding here, Admiral Morrison said calmly, is your belief that your relationship with this young woman gives you permission to physically assault her in public. He turned to me, and his expression softened slightly. Miss, are you all right? Do you need medical attention? I shook my head, still too stunned to form coherent sentences. This entire situation felt surreal. 20 minutes ago, I'd walked into this store to buy a ring. Now I was standing here with a red handprint on my face while a 4-star admiral confronted my sister about assault. What's your name? He asked gently. Victoria, I managed to whisper. Victoria Hayes. Victoria, I want you to understand something. What just happened here was not your fault. You have every right to spend your money on whatever makes you happy, and no one, family or otherwise, has the right to physically attack you for your choices. Admiral Morrison turned back to Melissa, and his voice hardened again. As for you, I suggest you think very carefully about your next words and actions. There are several witnesses here who just watched you commit assault. The young lady would be well within her rights to press charges. Charges? Melissa squeaked. But she's my sister. People don't press charges against family. People press charges against anyone who breaks the law, the Admiral replied. And assault is against the law regardless of family ties. I could see Melissa's mind racing, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. She glanced around the store, taking in all the faces staring at her, and I could practically watch her calculating the social and legal consequences of what she'd done. Victoria, she said, her voice now pleading instead of harsh. Come on, you know I didn't mean to hurt you. We were just having an argument, and things got a little heated. You're not really going to make a big deal out of this, are you? Before I could answer, Admiral Morrison stepped forward again. Whether or not Miss Hayes chooses to pursue legal action is entirely her decision. But I want to make something crystal clear to you. He moved closer to Melissa, and though he never raised his voice, there was something in his tone that made everyone in the store lean in to listen. I have spent my entire adult life defending the principles this country was founded on: freedom, dignity, the right to pursue happiness without persecution. What I witnessed here today was the antithesis of everything I've sworn to protect. Melissa tried to interrupt, but he held up a hand. I'm not finished. You used your position as this young woman's sister to publicly humiliate her for making an independent choice with her own money. You mocked her job, her living situation, and her personal decisions. Then, when she didn't respond the way you wanted, you escalated to physical violence. The Admiral paused, letting his words sink in. In the military, we have a term for people who abuse their position to intimidate and harm others. We call them bullies, and we don't tolerate them. The fact that your family makes your behavior worse, not better. I had never heard anyone stand up to Melissa like this. Growing up, she'd always been the golden child. Prettier, smarter, more successful. Our parents had consistently taken her side in any conflict, and I'd learned early that fighting back only made things worse. I'd spent years convincing myself that her treatment of me was just how sisters are, that her constant criticism came from a place of caring. But listening to Admiral Morrison describe her behavior in such stark terms, I realized how wrong I'd been. This wasn't normal sibling rivalry. This was abuse. Plain and simple. Now, the Admiral continued, you're going to apologize to your sister, not because I'm telling you to, but because it's the right thing to do. Then you're going to leave this store and think seriously about how you treat people who care about you. Melissa looked around the store one more time, taking in the disapproving faces surrounding her. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Victoria, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have hit you. It wasn't much of an apology, but it was more than I'd ever gotten from her before. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Good, Admiral Morrison said. Now leave. Melissa gathered her purse and walked toward the door, her heels clicking on the tile floor. Just before she reached the exit, she turned back. This isn't over, Victoria, she said quietly. Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the store like a blade. Yes, it is. The silence that followed Melissa's exit was deafening. The other customers slowly began to disperse, whispering among themselves as they returned to browsing the jewelry displays. But I remained frozen in place, staring at the door where my sister had disappeared, trying to process what had just happened. Admiral Morrison approached me carefully, as if I might bolt at any sudden movement. Victoria, are you sure you're all right? You look like you're in shock. I was in shock. In the span of 30 minutes, I'd been publicly humiliated, physically assaulted, and then defended by one of the highest-ranking military officers in the country. My brain was struggling to catch up with reality. I don't understand, I said finally. Why did you help me? You don't even know me. The Admiral's expression softened, and for the first time since he'd spoken those commanding words to Melissa, he looked less like a military commander and more like someone's grandfather. May I tell you a story, Victoria? I nodded, still trying to make sense of everything. 40 years ago, I was a young ensign stationed in San Diego. I was 23, far from home, and trying to prove myself in a career that demanded everything I had. One weekend, I was at a department store buying a gift for my mother's birthday when I witnessed something that changed my perspective forever. Mr. Brennan had retreated behind his counter but was listening intently. The few remaining customers had stopped pretending to shop and were openly eavesdropping on our conversation. There was a young woman, probably about your age, trying to return a dress she'd bought for a job interview. The dress didn't fit properly, and she'd kept the receipt, done everything right. But the manager, a man twice her size, was berating her, telling her she was lying, that she'd worn the dress and was trying to scam the store. Admiral Morrison paused, his eyes distant as he recalled the memory. The woman started crying, not just from frustration, but from humiliation. This manager was treating her like a criminal in front of a store full of people, and no one was doing anything to help. Everyone just stood there, watching this public degradation like it was entertainment. I found myself hanging on every word. There was something about the way he told the story that made it feel deeply personal. I was young, intimidated by authority figures, and I told myself it wasn't my business. I stood there with everyone else and watched this woman be destroyed over a $20 dress. When she finally gave up and left the store in tears, I felt sick to my stomach. "What happened to her?" I asked. "I don't know. I never saw her again." But I made myself a promise that day. I swore that if I ever witnessed someone being abused or humiliated, when I had the power to stop it, I would act, no matter what. The weight of his words settled over me. This man hadn't intervened because he was bored or looking for attention. He'd stepped in because 40 years ago he'd failed to help someone who needed it, and he'd been carrying that regret ever since. "You reminded me of her," he continued. "Standing there, trying to buy something that meant something to you, being torn down by someone who should have been supporting you. I couldn't let history repeat itself." Mr. Brennan cleared his throat softly. "Victoria, if you're still interested, your ring is right here. After everything that's happened, I want you to know that I think you're making a wonderful choice. That ring deserves to belong to someone who truly appreciates its beauty." I looked down at the ring box, still sitting open on the counter. The sapphire caught the light, sparkling like a small piece of captured sky. All the doubt Melissa had planted in my mind began to fade away. "It really is beautiful, isn't it?" I said. "It's perfect," Admiral Morrison agreed. "And more importantly, it's what you want. That's all that matters." I picked up the ring and slipped it onto my right ring finger. It fit perfectly, and seeing it on my hand made me feel something I hadn't experienced in years: pride in myself and my own choices. "I'll take it," I told Mr. Brennan. As he began processing my payment, Admiral Morrison continued talking. "Victoria, I hope you don't mind me asking, but has your sister always treated you this way?" The question caught me off guard. I'd spent so many years accepting Melissa's behavior as normal that I'd never really examined it objectively. "She's always been competitive," I said carefully. "Our parents always held her up as the example I should follow. She's successful, married, has the perfect life. I think she gets frustrated that I don't want the same thing she wants. That doesn't give her the right to assault you. I know that now. But growing up, she was always the one who got praised for being responsible, for making good decisions. I was the screw-up, the one who needed guidance. I guess I got used to her criticism." Admiral Morrison frowned. "Victoria, can I ask you something? What do you do for work?" Quote, "I'm a marketing coordinator for a tech startup called Innovate Tech Solutions. We develop software for small businesses." "Do you enjoy it?" "I love it. The company is growing fast, and I've been promoted twice in the past year. My boss says I have real talent for understanding what customers need." "That sounds like someone who makes good decisions to me. What about your living situation? You mentioned a studio apartment?" I felt a familiar flush of embarrassment. "It's small, but it's in a great neighborhood. I can walk to work, there are good restaurants nearby, and I've made friends with my neighbors. It's perfect for where I am in my life right now." "Again, sounds like good decision-making. And this ring? You saved for months to buy something that has personal meaning to you. That's not impulsive spending, that's thoughtful planning." As he spoke, I began to see my life through different eyes. The narrative Melissa had always pushed, that I was irresponsible, unsuccessful, making poor choices, didn't match the reality of what I'd accomplished. "Your sister," Admiral Morrison continued, "seems to have convinced you that success only looks one way: marriage, house, expensive jewelry. But success is actually much simpler than that. It's being able to support yourself, make your own choices, and find happiness in the life you've built." Mr. Brennan handed me the receipt and a small velvet bag for the ring box. "Congratulations, Victoria. I hope this ring brings you many years of joy." I looked down at my hand, admiring how the sapphire looked against my skin. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy with a decision I'd made. "Admiral Morrison," I said, "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't been here, you would have found your strength eventually," he said with certainty. "I just helped speed up the process. But Victoria, I need to ask you something important. What your sister said as she left, about this not being over." Are you safe? Does she have a history of escalating when she doesn't get her way? The question made my stomach clench. Melissa had never hit me before today, but she had a long history of getting revenge when she felt wronged. Phone calls to our parents painting me as ungrateful. Social media posts designed to embarrass me. Comments to mutual friends about my poor life choices. She'll probably call our parents, I said. Tell them I embarrassed the family. Made a scene in public. She's good at making herself the victim. And what will you tell them? For the first time all day I smiled. The truth, that I had bought a beautiful ring for myself, and when my sister assaulted me for it, a decorated military hero stepped in to protect me. Admiral Morrison chuckled. I like that version of events. It has the advantage of being accurate. As we walked toward the exit together, I realized that this day had become a turning point. Not just because of the ring, or even because of Melissa's attack, but because someone had shown me that I deserved to be defended. That my choices were valid. That I didn't have to accept mistreatment from anyone, even family. Admiral, I said as we reached the door, would it be all right if I stayed in touch? I'd like to thank you properly once I've processed all of this. He handed me a business card. I'd be honored, Victoria, and remember, you're stronger than you know. As I walked out of Brennan's fine jewelry, the sapphire ring glinting on my finger, I had no idea that Melissa was already 3 blocks away, making a phone call that would change everything. I made it exactly 6 blocks from Brennan's fine jewelry before my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Mom, and my stomach immediately knotted. I'd been expecting this call, but I'd hoped to have at least a few hours to enjoy my new ring before the family drama began. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Then again. By the 4th call, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I ducked into a coffee shop called Grind Coffee and found a quiet corner table before answering. Hello, Mom. Victoria Marie Hayes, what in the world is wrong with you? My mother's voice was sharp with anger, using my full name the way she had when I was a child, caught breaking something valuable. I'm fine, thank you for asking. How are you? Don't you dare use that tone with me, young lady. Melissa just called me in tears, absolutely hysterical. She said you had her arrested at some jewelry store? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Of course Melissa had gotten to our parents first. Of course she'd twisted the story to make herself the victim. I didn't have anyone arrested, Mom. Melissa slapped me in public and someone witnessed it. They suggested she could be charged with assault, but I didn't press charges. Slapped you? Victoria, you're being dramatic. Melissa said you two had a little argument, and you completely overreacted. She's worried sick about you. A little argument? I could feel my voice rising and forced myself to speak more quietly. The coffee shop was busy, but I didn't want to create another public scene. Mom, she hit me. In front of a store full of people. There's nothing little about that. Family members have disagreements, Victoria. That's normal. What's not normal is embarrassing your sister in front of strangers and making threats about involving the police. I stared out the coffee shop window, watching people walk by living their normal Saturday lives, and marveled at how quickly my family could make me feel like I was the problem. What did Melissa tell you exactly? I asked. She said she was trying to help you make a better financial decision, and you got defensive and started causing a scene. She said some strange man threatened her and made her feel unsafe, and you just stood there and let it happen. The version of events my mother described bore no resemblance to what had actually occurred. In Melissa's telling, she was the concerned sister trying to help. I was the unstable one causing problems, and Admiral Morrison was some threatening stranger who'd made her fear for her safety. Mom, that's not what happened. I was buying a ring I'd been saving for, and Melissa showed up and started insulting me, my job, my apartment, my choices. When I didn't back down, she slapped me across the face, hard enough that everyone in the store turned to stare. A ring? What kind of ring costs enough to cause this kind of family crisis? It's a vintage sapphire ring. It cost $1,200, which I saved for over 6 months. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. $1,200? My mother finally said. Victoria, please tell me you didn't actually spend $1,200 on jewelry for yourself. Why is that such a problem? It's my money. I work hard. I pay my bills. I should be able to buy something I want. Because it's irresponsible. You should be saving for a house, for your future, for emergencies, not wasting money on frivolous things like expensive jewelry. I looked down at my ring, still beautiful, still meaningful, but now tainted by the family drama surrounding it. It's not frivolous to me, Mom. This ring represents something important. It looks like Grandma Eleanor's ring, the one you had to sell when I was 12. Don't bring your grandmother into this. She would be appalled by this kind of wasteful spending. That hurt more than I expected. My grandmother had been the one person in my family who'd always supported my independence, who'd encouraged me to make my own choices and trust my own judgment. The idea that she'd disapprove of something that honored her memory felt like a betrayal. Grandma always told me to buy beautiful things that made me happy, I said quietly. She said life was too short to surround yourself with things that didn't bring you joy. Your grandmother said a lot of things. That doesn't mean you should base major financial decisions on them. My phone buzzed with another incoming call. Dad, the tag team approach was beginning. Mom, I need to go. I'm getting another call. This conversation isn't over, Victoria. Your father and I are very concerned about your decision-making lately. Maybe it's time to consider moving back home, where we can help you get back on track. The threat was subtle, but clear. If I didn't fall in line with their expectations, they'd start pushing for me to give up my independence entirely. I'm 24 years old, Mom. I have a good job in my own apartment. I'm not moving back home because you don't approve of a ring I bought. We'll discuss this more when you've had time to calm down and think rationally. She hung up before I could respond. Immediately, my phone started ringing again. Dad, this time. I declined the call and switched my phone to silent. I needed time to think, to process what was happening, before I talked to anyone else in my family. The coffee shop around me buzzed with normal Saturday afternoon activity. College students studying at laptops, couples sharing pastries, friends catching up over lattes. Everyone seemed to be living uncomplicated lives where buying jewelry didn't result in family emergencies. I pulled Admiral Morrison's business card from my purse and stared at it. The official Navy seal was embossed at the top, followed by his name and contact information. There was something reassuring about holding physical proof that the morning's events had actually happened, that I hadn't imagined having someone defend me against Melissa's abuse. My phone lit up with text messages. Melissa, I can't believe you're doing this to our family. Mom and Dad are devastated. Melissa, all I did was try to help you make a better choice, and you turned it into some kind of attack. Quote, Melissa, that man you let threaten me could have been dangerous. What if he'd hurt me? Would you have cared? I stared at the messages, amazed by how completely Melissa had rewritten history in her own mind. In her version of events, she was the victim, I was the aggressor, and Admiral Morrison was a potential threat rather than a protector. Before I could decide how to respond, another text arrived from an unknown number. Victoria, this is Admiral Morrison. I hope you don't mind that I asked Mr. Brennan for your contact information. I wanted to check on you and make sure you were all right after this morning's events. I typed back quickly. I'm okay, thank you for checking. My family is not happy about what happened, but I'm handling it. His response came within minutes. Family dynamics can be complicated, especially when someone challenges an established pattern of behavior. You stood up for yourself today, and that takes courage. Don't let anyone convince you that was wrong. Reading his words felt like having someone throw me a lifeline. After 30 minutes of phone calls and texts, designed to make me feel guilty and unstable, here was someone reminding me that defending myself wasn't a character flaw. I typed, my sister told my parents that you threatened her and made her feel unsafe. She's painting you as some kind of dangerous stranger who intimidated her. I'm not surprised. People who abuse others often portray themselves as victims when they're held accountable. It's a classic manipulation tactic. The phrase, people who abuse others, stopped me cold. I'd never thought of Melissa's treatment of me as abuse. She was my sister. Sisters fought. But Admiral Morrison's clinical description of her behavior patterns made me see the situation with new clarity. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Victoria, this is Brad, Melissa's husband. We need to talk. Brad's voice was different from what I expected. Where I'd anticipated anger or accusations, there was something that sounded almost like exhaustion. Victoria, before you hang up, please just listen to me for 2 minutes. I'm not calling to yell at you or take sides. I need to tell you something important. I hesitated. Brad had always been polite to me at family gatherings, but we'd never had a real conversation. He was Melissa's husband, part of her perfect life package, and I'd assumed he shared her opinions about my choices. Okay, I said carefully. I'm listening. I wasn't there this morning, but I've heard 2 very different versions of what happened. Melissa's version, and the version she accidentally let slip when she was on the phone with your mother and didn't realize I was in the room. My heart started beating faster. What do you mean? In the version she told me directly, she was trying to help you avoid a bad financial decision and some stranger threatened her. But when she was talking to your mom, thinking I couldn't hear, she was laughing about how she put you in your place and how shocked you looked when she slapped you. The confirmation that Melissa had been lying to everyone shouldn't have surprised me, but it still felt like a punch to the stomach. She also mentioned that the man who intervened was some kind of high-ranking military officer, and she was worried about what would happen if her version of events didn't hold up under scrutiny. So you believe what really happened? Brad was quiet for a long moment. Victoria, I've been married to your sister for 7 years. I love her, but I'm not blind to her faults. She has a pattern of aggressive behavior when people don't do what she thinks they should do. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have with my brother-in-law. Has she ever hit you? I asked, the question coming out before I could stop myself. No, but she's thrown things. Dishes, mostly. And she has a way of making me feel like I'm the problem when I try to call her out on her behavior. I've learned it's easier to just go along with what she wants. The picture Brad was painting of his marriage was nothing like the perfect relationship Melissa had always portrayed. I thought about all the times she'd bragged about how devoted Brad was, how he always deferred to her judgment, how their marriage worked because he understood she was usually right. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I think you deserve to know that someone in the family sees what's really happening, and because I'm worried about what Melissa might do next. She's not handling this well. What do you mean? She's been on the phone all afternoon, calling everyone in the family, calling some of her friends, even calling people from your workplace. My blood ran cold. She called people from my work? How does she even know who I work with? LinkedIn, Facebook, the company website. Victoria, she's been researching this Admiral Morrison too. She's convinced that if she can find something to discredit him, it'll make her version of events more believable. I felt sick. The idea of Melissa dragging my professional life into this family drama was terrifying. I'd worked hard to build a good reputation at Innovate Tech, and my boss had been talking about promoting me to senior coordinator next month. What exactly is she telling people? She's saying you had some kind of breakdown in public, that you were making poor financial decisions, and when she tried to help, you enlisted a stranger to threaten her. She's framing it like you're having mental health issues, and she's the concerned sister trying to get you help. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. Not only was Melissa rewriting what had happened, she was actively working to damage my reputation and credibility with anyone who might hear my side of the story. Brad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you think your wife is dangerous? Not just mean or manipulative, but actually dangerous. He was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. I don't think she'd physically hurt you again, he said finally. But I think she's capable of destroying your reputation, your relationships, maybe even your job if she feels threatened enough. And right now, she feels very threatened. Because someone finally stood up to her. Exactly. Melissa's whole identity is built on being the successful one, the one who has everything figured out, the one who helps everyone else make better choices. What happened today challenges that narrative fundamentally. My phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from my coworker, Sarah. Hey, your sister called asking about you. Said she was worried about your mental health? Everything okay? She's already started, I told Brad, reading him the text. She called my coworker. Victoria, you need to get ahead of this. If Melissa is calling your work contacts, she's serious about trying to damage your credibility. You should probably talk to your boss before she does. The thought of having to explain this situation to my boss made me want to disappear. How do you tell your employer that your sister is calling people claiming you're having a mental breakdown because she slapped you in a jewelry store? I have an idea, Brad said suddenly. What if we could get other people to come forward? People who've witnessed Melissa's behavior before but never said anything because it was quote, family business? What do you mean? Think about it. Melissa's been doing this kind of thing for years, right? Publicly embarrassing people, making scenes when she doesn't get her way, manipulating situations to make herself look like the victim. She's probably done it to other people besides you. He was right. I could think of at least 3 family gatherings where Melissa had made someone cry with her helpful criticism. Our cousin Emma at Christmas 2 years ago, when Melissa spent an entire dinner explaining why Emma's boyfriend was wrong for her. Our Aunt Karen, who'd stopped hosting family gatherings after Melissa criticized everything from the food to the decorations. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time people stopped enabling Melissa's behavior by staying quiet about it. If she wants to make this public, maybe we should let her, but make sure the whole truth comes out. Before I could respond, my phone started ringing again. This time it was Admiral Morrison. I need to take this, I told Brad, but thank you for calling, for being honest with me. Victoria, be careful. I love my wife, but I know what she's capable of when she feels cornered. I switched to the other call. Admiral Morrison? Victoria, I'm calling because I've received some interesting phone calls this afternoon. It seems your sister has been trying to contact me through official Navy channels. Oh no, what did she say? She filed a formal complaint, claiming that I used my military position to intimidate a civilian and that I threatened her physical safety. She's demanding an investigation into my conduct. I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to get in trouble because you helped me. I'm not in trouble, Victoria, but I thought you should know that your sister is escalating this situation significantly. Filing false complaints against military personnel is a serious matter. False complaints? Very false. The store has security cameras, there were multiple witnesses, and I never threatened her with anything other than the possibility of legal consequences for assault. But the fact that she's willing to lie to federal investigators tells me she's more dangerous than I initially thought. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. Melissa wasn't just trying to hurt me anymore. She was willing to potentially destroy the career of a decorated military officer who'd done nothing but protect me. What happens now? I asked. Now, Victoria, we document everything, and we make sure the truth comes out before your sister can do any more damage. 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room at the Navy's regional headquarters, surrounded by more documentation than I'd ever seen in my life. Admiral Morrison had been right about one thing. When you decide to tell the truth, you better be prepared to prove it. The investigation into Melissa's complaint had moved quickly once the Navy investigators realized what they were dealing with. Security footage from Brennan's fine jewelry showed everything exactly as it had happened. Witness statements from customers and Mr. Brennan himself corroborated every detail of Admiral Morrison's account. Most damning of all, Melissa's phone records showed she'd made 17 different calls immediately after leaving the jewelry store, each one telling a slightly different version of events. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Shaw, the investigating officer, spread out the timeline they'd constructed across the conference table. Miss Hayes, I want you to understand that what your sister did goes far beyond a simple family dispute. Filing false accusations against a military officer is a federal offense. But more importantly, her systematic campaign to damage your reputation and credibility shows a pattern of harassment that crosses several legal boundaries. I looked down at my hands, still wearing the sapphire ring that had started this entire ordeal. It felt surreal that something so beautiful had triggered such an avalanche of consequences. The question now, Lieutenant Commander Shaw continued, is what you want to do about it. Admiral Morrison leaned forward in his chair. Victoria, I need you to know that regardless of what you decide, the Navy's investigation cleared me completely. Melissa's complaint has been dismissed, and she's been informed that filing additional false reports could result in criminal charges. You don't need to worry about protecting me. But I did worry. This man had stood up for me when no one else would, and my family drama had nearly caused an investigation into his conduct. What are my options? I asked. Well, Lieutenant Commander Shaw said, consulting her notes, Your sister's actions constitute harassment, defamation, and interference with your employment. She contacted your workplace with false information designed to damage your professional reputation. That's illegal in Oregon. During the past 2 weeks, I had learned exactly how far Melissa's campaign had reached. She'd called my boss, claiming I was having a mental breakdown and needed intervention. She'd contacted 3 of my coworkers, suggesting I was making poor decisions and might be unstable. She'd even called my landlord, claiming I was behind on rent and asking if I'd shown signs of erratic behavior. The only reason none of it had stuck was because my track record spoke for itself. My boss, Jennifer Chen, had called me directly after Melissa's call to ask if I was okay and to let me know that my work performance and professional demeanor had always been exemplary. My coworkers had been confused by Melissa's calls and had checked with me rather than believing her stories. My landlord had verified that I'd never been late with rent and told Melissa that her call was inappropriate. But the fact remained that Melissa had attempted to systematically destroy my life because I'd bought a ring she disapproved of, and someone had held her accountable for hitting me. "There's something else you should know," Admiral Morrison said gently. "We found out why your sister was at the jewelry store that day." I looked up, curious. Melissa had said she was shopping for anniversary jewelry, but something about that had always seemed off to me. "She'd been tracking your social media posts. You'd mentioned being excited about a special purchase you'd been saving for. She went to several jewelry stores in the area that morning, asking if a Victoria Hayes had been in recently. She found Brennan's by calling ahead and confirming you had a ring on hold." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. She was following me? It appears she was concerned about what you might be spending money on and decided to intervene. This wasn't a coincidental meeting, Victoria. She planned to confront you. Lieutenant Commander Shaw nodded. "Your sister's phone records show she spent considerable time researching your workplace, your apartment complex, and your social media presence before the incident. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment family argument. This was a calculated attempt to control your behavior." I thought about all the times over the years when Melissa had seemed to know things about my life that I hadn't told her. Comments about dates I'd been on, knowledge of job interviews I'd mentioned on Facebook, opinions about friends she'd never met. I'd always assumed our parents were sharing information, but now I wondered how long she'd been monitoring my life. "What happens if I press charges?" I asked. Given the evidence, charges would likely result in convictions for harassment and defamation. Your sister would face fines, possible jail time, and a permanent criminal record. It would also likely end her marriage, since her husband has indicated he's considering divorce if she doesn't seek professional help for her behavior. Brad had called me 3 times during the investigation. Each conversation had revealed more about the reality of Melissa's marriage. The thrown dishes were just the beginning. She'd isolated him from his friends, controlled their finances, and made decisions about his career without consulting him. He'd been living with her abuse for years, just as I had, but he'd finally reached his breaking point. "There's also the option of a restraining order without criminal charges," Lieutenant Commander Shaw added. "It would legally prohibit your sister from contacting you, your employer, or anyone else in your life. Violation would result in immediate arrest." Admiral Morrison studied my face carefully. "Victoria, what do you want to do? Not what you think you should do, not what would be easiest for your family, but what do you actually want?" I looked around the conference room, taking in the official Navy seal on the wall, the stacks of evidence documenting my sister's harassment campaign, the faces of people who'd taken my situation seriously when my own family had dismissed it. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly supported, not just protected, but believed. These people had investigated thoroughly, documented everything carefully, and presented me with real options for holding Melissa accountable for her actions. "I want the restraining order," I said finally. "I don't want to destroy her life with criminal charges, but I want her to stop. I want to be able to live my life without worrying about what she'll do if she disapproves of my choices." 6 months later, I was promoted to Senior Marketing Coordinator at Innovate Tech. My boss had been impressed by how professionally I'd handled what she called a difficult personal situation, and my work performance had only improved once. I wasn't constantly stressed about family drama. The restraining order had held. Melissa had tested it once, showing up at my apartment building, but a neighbor had called the police and she'd been arrested. After spending a night in jail, she'd apparently decided that staying away from me was preferable to facing legal consequences. Our parents had eventually learned the full truth about what happened at the jewelry store. Mr. Brennan had provided them with security footage when they demanded to know Victoria's side of the story. Watching their daughter assault me in public had been a wake-up call they couldn't ignore. They'd started attending family therapy sessions with Brad, trying to understand how they'd enabled Melissa's behavior for so many years. Admiral Morrison and I had become unlikely friends. He'd been reassigned to a position in Washington, D.C., but we exchanged emails regularly. He'd become something of a mentor, someone I could talk to about big decisions without worrying about judgment or manipulation. The sapphire ring still sparkled on my finger as I typed up my final marketing report of the day. Every time I looked at it, I remembered not just the jewelry store incident, but everything that had come after. The investigation, the documentation, the moment I decided to stop accepting mistreatment as normal. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places. I'd learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, that family relationships shouldn't require you to accept abuse, and that sometimes strangers care more about your well-being than the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. Most importantly, I'd learned that buying something beautiful for yourself isn't just acceptable, it's a form of self-respect. And that's a lesson worth every penny I'd spent, and every difficult conversation that had followed. The ring had cost $1,200. Learning to value myself? That had been priceless. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.